The 1980s and 1990s were the golden age of science fiction, a time when filmmakers dared to dream of dystopias, androids, and intergalactic wars. But not every vision of the future was welcomed. Some movies were too dark, too daring, or too ahead of their time. These are the films that crossed the line, censored, banned, or buried for decades. Welcome to Globewise Entertainment, where we uncover the hidden and controversial stories behind cinema's most shocking creations. Today, we're diving deep into 15 banned sci-fi films from the 1980s and 1990s, movies that challenged society, defied censors, and redefined the meaning of science fiction. So sit back, buckle up, and get ready for a journey through the forbidden future of cinema. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment, your destination for the untold, the unseen, and the unforgettable side of Hollywood. Which of these banned sci-fi films surprised you the most? Tell us your pick down in the comments below. 1. Hardware, 1990. The killer robot that censors couldn't stop. In the bleak wasteland of a post-apocalyptic Earth, Hardware, 1990, imagined a future ruled by rust, radiation, and paranoia. Directed by Richard Stanley, this gritty cyberpunk thriller followed a scavenger who unknowingly brings home the parts of a decommissioned military robot, only for it to reassemble itself and unleash chaos inside a cramped apartment. What made Hardware so controversial wasn't just the violence, it was its unflinching vision of government surveillance, religious fanaticism, and technological decay. The film's brutal imagery and anti-authoritarian themes led to it being banned or heavily censored in several countries, including the UK under its notorious video nasties crackdown. Yet despite the bans, Hardware became a cult masterpiece, a grim warning about machines inheriting a broken world. Today, it stands as one of the most haunting sci-fi films of its era, a mechanical nightmare that refused to stay buried. 2. Society, 1989. The most disturbing sci-fi horror you weren't meant to see. In 1989, one movie shocked audiences so deeply it was banned in several countries, a film that turned Beverly Hills glamour into grotesque horror. The movie was Society, and trust me, it's not for the faint of heart. Society follows a wealthy teenager, Bill Whitney, who suspects something bizarre about his family and their high society friends. Everyone around him seems too perfect, too polished, until he discovers the sick truth. The upper class are actually mutant elites who literally feed on the poor. The film builds up like a mystery thriller, but the final act explodes into one of the most disturbing scenes in sci-fi horror history, a nightmarish shunting ritual where the rich physically merge and consume human bodies in a melting, slimy orgy of flesh. Director Brian Yuzna used mind-bending practical effects and biting social commentary to expose the dark side of privilege and corruption. But the movie's shocking visuals got it banned in multiple countries and heavily censored elsewhere for perverse imagery and disturbing social satire. Today, Society, 1989, is considered a cult classic, a bold sci-fi allegory that dared to say, the elite don't just rule us, they consume us. If you're brave enough, watch it, but don't say I didn't warn you. And if you love discovering banned sci-fi gems like this one, hit subscribe to Globewise Entertainment, where we uncover the shocking, forgotten side of cinema. 3. Tetsuo, the Iron Man, 1989. In 1989, Japanese filmmaker Shinya Tsukamoto unleashed a cinematic nightmare that would forever change the boundaries of sci-fi and horror. Tetsuo, the Iron Man. Imagine a world where flesh fuses with metal, where pain becomes transformation, and where a man's slow metamorphosis into a machine mirrors the chaos of modern industrial life. That's the raw, mechanical heart of Tetsuo. Shot in gritty black and white, on a shoestring budget, Tsukamoto's film feels more like a fever dream than a traditional movie. The story follows an ordinary man who begins to find shards of metal growing out of his skin after a bizarre accident. Soon, his body twists, mutates, and transforms, until he becomes something not quite human, not quite machine, a living, breathing weapon of industrial horror. But it wasn't just the disturbing imagery that caused controversy. Tetsuo's intense violence, graphic body horror, and surreal editing led to bans and censorship in several countries. Even some Japanese theaters refused to show it, calling it too shocking for human consumption. Western censors labeled it an assault on the senses. Yet over time, this strange, metallic nightmare became a cult masterpiece, influencing everything from David Cronenberg's body horror to cyberpunk anime like Akira and Ghost in the Shell. Today, Tetsuo, the Iron Man, stands as one of the most visceral and daring sci-fi films ever made, a chaotic blend of horror, technology, and human fear that still feels ahead of its time. If you're brave enough to watch it, prepare yourself, because this isn't just science fiction. It's industrial madness turned into art. 4. The Final Program, 1973. The End of Man, the Birth of Something New. Long before the neon glow of 80s sci-fi and the high-tech paranoia of the 90s, there was The Final Program, a 1973 British cult film that dared to ask a disturbing question. What if humanity's next evolutionary step meant the end of gender, morality, and even individuality itself? Based on Michael Moorcock's groundbreaking novel, the film follows Jerry Cornelius, a brilliant yet dangerously eccentric scientist on a quest to complete his late father's final program, a machine designed to create the perfect being. But when Jerry merges with a mysterious woman inside the device, the result isn't salvation. It's a new and terrifying hybrid of man and machine. Director Robert Fust, known for his stylish surrealism, infused the movie with psychedelic visuals, dark humor, and apocalyptic philosophy. Yet these very elements made it too bizarre, too sexual, and too blasphemous for many 1970s audiences. In several countries, including parts of Europe and Asia, the final program was banned or heavily censored for its scenes implying bisexuality, drug use, and anti-religious imagery. Even decades later, its depiction of genderless creation and genetic merging made TV broadcasters and censors nervous. But over time, the final program gained a passionate cult following, praised for its daring ideas that eerily predicted transhumanism, AI consciousness, and the post-gender future, themes that would define sci-fi decades later. Today, it stands as one of the most intellectually provocative and visually strange banned sci-fi films ever made, a psychedelic prophecy of where humanity might be heading and whether we're truly ready for evolution's final step. 5. Threads, 1984. The film Too Real to Handle. In 1984, the BBC released one of the most haunting science fiction films ever made, Threads. Unlike the space adventures or futuristic fantasies that dominated the decade, Threads dared to explore a terrifyingly real possibility: nuclear war. Set in the quiet city of Sheffield, England, the story begins with ordinary lives, families planning weddings, young couples dreaming of the future, before the world suddenly falls into chaos. When nuclear bombs hit, the film doesn't flinch. It shows, in agonizing realism, how society collapses, food vanishes, technology fails, and humanity's thread begins to unravel. What made Threads truly horrifying wasn't monsters or aliens, it was us. The film depicted what would actually happen to everyday people in a post-nuclear world: radiation sickness, starvation, and the psychological breakdown of survivors. The BBC aired it once on television, and the reaction was explosive. Viewers were traumatized, schools banned it, and many governments around the world refused to broadcast it at all. Even in the United States, Threads was considered too disturbing for primetime audiences. But despite the bans, Threads became a cult legend, a chilling warning about the fragility of civilization and the price of human conflict. Many critics still call it the most realistic and terrifying depiction of nuclear war ever put on screen. So while other sci-fi movies of the 80s entertained, Threads educated and terrified an entire generation. 6. Evilspeak, 1981. The satanic computer that terrified censors. In the early 1980s, horror and technology collided in one of the strangest and most controversial cult films ever made, Evilspeak. Directed by Eric Weston, this low-budget gem starred a young Clint Howard as Stanley Coopersmith, a bullied military cadet who discovers a forbidden book of dark rituals and decides to bring Satan into the digital age. Yes, you heard that right. Instead of a dusty altar or creepy candlelight, Stanley summons the devil using a computer. The idea of a possessed machine channeling demonic power was shocking at the time, long before the internet age. But what really pushed Evilspeak over the edge wasn't the premise. It was the graphic violence and religious imagery. When the film was released in 1981, critics and censors were horrified by its scenes of animal sacrifice, nude rituals, and gruesome revenge killings. In the UK, it landed straight on the infamous Video Nasties list, banned under the Obscene Publications Act for its unrelenting satanic tone and excessive gore. Even the American version faced heavy cuts before it could reach theaters. Ironically, the movie's outrageous blend of 80s computer tech, demonic possession, and bloody payback made it a cult favorite decades later. Fans now see Evilspeak as a bold reflection of early fears about computers and moral decay, and Clint Howard's unhinged performance has become legendary in horror circles. Today, Evilspeak stands as a bizarre but brilliant reminder of how the 1980s blended satanic panic, military cruelty, and digital nightmares into one unforgettable horror experience. What do you think? Was Evilspeak ahead of its time or too extreme for its era? 7. They Live, 1988. The sci-fi that dared to wake us up. In 1988, legendary horror master John Carpenter gave the world a movie that looked like a fun B-movie about aliens, but hid a truth that terrified censors. They Live wasn't just science fiction, it was a warning. The story follows a drifter named Nada, played by wrestler-turned-actor Roddy Piper, who discovers a pair of mysterious sunglasses. But these aren't ordinary shades. When he puts them on, he sees the world as it truly is. Hidden among us are grotesque alien overlords, manipulating humanity through subliminal messages: obey, consume, conform. What seemed like a pulpy alien invasion flick quickly turned into a biting satire on capitalism, media control, and political corruption, themes the world wasn't ready to face in the late 80s. The movie's message was bold, its metaphors too close to reality, and the establishment didn't like it one bit. In several countries, They Live was temporarily pulled from theaters and banned from TV broadcasts, accused of promoting anti-government propaganda. Even in the US, major critics dismissed it as dangerous paranoia. But over time, fans began to see what Carpenter was trying to say, that the real enemy wasn't from outer space, but the systems that control what we see and believe. And of course, who could forget the epic 6-minute alley fight scene, one of the longest and most brutal fistfights ever filmed, symbolizing the struggle to awaken the blind. Today, They Live is more than a cult classic. It's a prophetic masterpiece that feels even more relevant in our world of algorithms, influencers, and corporate control. John Carpenter said it best. The film is about the way we are controlled without even realizing it. A sci-fi thriller once dismissed as a cheap conspiracy film has now become a chilling reflection of modern society, proving that sometimes the movies we ban are the ones that tell the most truth. 8. Brazil, 1985. In 1985, visionary director Terry Gilliam unleashed Brazil, a dark, dystopian sci-fi satire that felt like George Orwell's 1984, colliding with Monty Python. It imagined a world strangled by endless bureaucracy, where technology enslaved rather than liberated humanity. The story follows Sam Lowry, a low-level government worker trapped in a nightmarish system of paperwork and propaganda. His only escape is through surreal dreams of freedom, until a simple clerical error brands an innocent man a terrorist, and Sam's life spirals into chaos. But Brazil wasn't just a movie, it was a rebellion. Universal Pictures hated Gilliam's bleak vision and demanded a happy ending. When Gilliam refused to compromise, The studio banned the film's release in the US, locking it in the vault while Gilliam fought a very public battle for artistic freedom. The conflict became Hollywood legend. Gilliam even took out a full-page ad in Variety, asking Universal's boss directly, "When are you going to release my movie, Mr. Sid Sheinberg?" Critics eventually saw Gilliam's cut through underground screenings, and it was hailed as a masterpiece of dystopian cinema, bold, biting, and disturbingly prophetic. Today, Brazil is celebrated as one of the most daring sci-fi films ever made, a vision too subversive for its time, and one that dared to expose how control and conformity can destroy the human spirit. A banned film that became a timeless warning, and a reminder that even in a world run by machines, imagination is still the ultimate act of rebellion. 9. The Lawnmower Man, 1992. When The Lawnmower Man hit theaters in 1992, audiences thought they were witnessing the dawn of a new cinematic era, one that fused science fiction, virtual reality, and the dangers of human experimentation into one mind-bending story. Pierce Brosnan stars as a brilliant but reckless scientist who uses experimental virtual reality technology to enhance the intelligence of a simple-minded gardener, played by Jeff Fahey. But what begins as a noble experiment quickly spirals into a digital nightmare. As the gardener's mind expands beyond human limits, he becomes obsessed with transcending the physical world and entering the virtual one entirely. The film's groundbreaking CGI visuals were unlike anything moviegoers had seen before. It tapped into early 90s fears about the rise of computers, artificial intelligence, and how technology could warp human identity. But the controversy didn't end with the plot. The Lawnmower Man was banned or heavily censored in several regions due to its graphic depictions of human testing, disturbing transformations, and intense psychological sequences. Some networks even refused to air the uncut version, calling it too disturbing for home audiences. And then came another kind of scandal, the lawsuit from Stephen King. The movie was loosely based on King's short story of the same name, but the author sued the filmmakers for using his name in the marketing, claiming the film had almost nothing to do with his original work. King won, and the studio had to remove his name from all future releases. Despite the chaos, The Lawnmower Man became a cult favorite, a strange, glitchy time capsule of early CGI and the paranoia of a digital future. Today, it stands as both a warning and a prophecy of how far technology and human ambition can really go. What do you think? Was The Lawnmower Man ahead of its time, or just too weird for audiences back then? Tell us in the comments below. If you haven't yet, subscribe to Globewise Entertainment for more deep dives into banned, censored, and forgotten sci-fi classics from Hollywood's wildest decades. 10. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. The sci-fi nightmare too disturbing for society. When Stanley Kubrick released A Clockwork Orange, it wasn't just another futuristic film, it was a brutal mirror held up to humanity. Set in a dystopian Britain where violence, manipulation, and free will collide, the movie followed Alex Delarge, a young gang leader with a taste for Beethoven and chaos. Kubrick's film was a psychological experiment disguised as science fiction, exploring how far a government might go to reprogram its citizens for obedience. But what started as social commentary quickly turned into one of the most infamous bans in cinema history. The movie's graphic depictions of ultraviolence and psychological conditioning sparked outrage across the UK and beyond. After several reported copycat crimes, Kubrick himself pulled the film from British distribution, an act of self-censorship that lasted nearly 27 years. It wasn't until the year 2000, long after Kubrick's death, that A Clockwork Orange was officially re-released in Britain. In countries like Ireland, Singapore, and South Africa, the film faced outright bans well into the 1990s, with censors calling it morally corrosive and a danger to youth. Yet despite all the controversy, A Clockwork Orange became a defining moment in cinematic history, a cult masterpiece that forced audiences to question where control ends and free will begins. Even today, the film's striking imagery, from the hypnotic Ludovico technique to its neon-lit futuristic world, remains both disturbing and unforgettable. Kubrick's genius proved one thing: sometimes the scariest science fiction isn't about aliens or monsters, it's about the dark potential within ourselves. 11. Event Horizon, 1997. The Gateway to Hell in Space. In 1997, Paramount Pictures unleashed one of the most disturbing sci-fi horror films ever made, Event Horizon. But what started as a bold attempt to blend 2001, A Space Odyssey with Hellraiser quickly spiraled into one of the most controversial and censored sci-fi movies of the late 20th century. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, Event Horizon follows a rescue crew sent to investigate a lost spaceship that mysteriously reappears near Neptune. But once aboard, they discover something far worse than a malfunction. The ship has literally traveled through a gateway to hell and brought something unspeakable back with it. At first glance, it looked like a standard space thriller. But when audiences saw what the ship had endured, shock turned into nausea. Anderson originally filmed 40 minutes of additional footage, sequences so graphic that even the studio called them unusable. We're talking mutilated corpses, eyes ripped out, cannibalistic orgies, and visions of demonic torment, all played out in blood-soaked flashes that blurred the line between sci-fi and satanic horror. When Paramount tested the film, viewers fainted and walked out of early screenings. Executives demanded massive cuts, slicing away most of the gore. But even the toned-down version that hit theaters was still too disturbing for many countries, leading to bans and heavy censorship in places like Germany and Australia. Ironically, Event Horizon bombed at the box office, but over time it became a cult masterpiece, praised for its haunting visuals and cosmic dread. Today, horror fans call it the Hellraiser in space that dared to ask one terrifying question: what if the real darkness of the universe isn't out there, but within us? The uncut version is now Hollywood legend, believed to be lost forever after the footage was misplaced in a salt mine during storage. And that only adds to its eerie legacy. Even now, nearly 3 decades later, Event Horizon stands as a banned and broken vision of sci-fi horror, proof that sometimes the scariest thing about exploring space is what might be waiting to come back. 12. Akira, 1988. The anime that shook the world. In the neon-soaked streets of Neo-Tokyo, a city reborn from nuclear fire, Akira exploded onto the screen in 1988 and forever changed the landscape of animation. Directed by Katsuhiro Otomo, this groundbreaking sci-fi epic told the story of psychic power, government corruption, and rebellion, wrapped in visuals so stunning that they seemed almost impossible for their time. But what made Akira more than just a masterpiece was its controversy. Upon release, it was banned or heavily censored in several countries, including parts of Europe and Southeast Asia, for its graphic violence, disturbing imagery, and apocalyptic tone. Critics labeled it too intense, while some governments feared its themes of youth rebellion and political collapse might spark unrest. Despite that, Akira became a cult legend, the film that proved animation could be just as serious, dark, and visionary as live-action cinema. Its influence stretched far beyond Japan, inspiring everything from The Matrix to Inception, and even shaping modern cyberpunk culture itself. Today, Akira stands as a symbol of artistic freedom, a once-banned masterpiece that dared to imagine the future in ways the world wasn't ready to see. And decades later, it still feels prophetic. Crash, 1996. The film that made audiences physically uncomfortable. In 1996, acclaimed director David Cronenberg, already known for pushing the limits of body horror, delivered one of his most controversial cinematic experiments ever, Crash. Based on J.G. Ballard's novel, Crash explores a subculture of people who develop sexual obsessions with car crashes, a chilling fusion of metal, flesh, and forbidden desire. Starring James Spader, Holly Hunter, and Rosanna Arquette, the film dives headfirst into the darker side of human psychology, where technology and intimacy dangerously collide. When it premiered at Cannes, audiences were stunned into silence. Some critics called it a masterpiece of modern alienation, while others branded it sick, depraved, and beyond redemption. Despite the controversy, Crash walked away with a special jury prize, proving even the most disturbing ideas could be artistically powerful. But not everyone agreed. In the UK, the film was banned outright in multiple regions, including Westminster, where local councils refused to allow screenings. Media watchdogs labeled it a moral threat, and some theaters faced public protests. In the US, the film narrowly escaped an NC-17 rating, with studios fearing it would destroy its box office potential. Behind all the outrage, Cronenberg insisted that Crash wasn't about shock. It was about the way modern life has merged machinery and emotion, turning technology into both savior and seducer. Today, Crash, 1996, is considered a cult classic, a film that dared to challenge how far cinema could go in exploring taboo desires and the psychology of obsession. Whether you see it as genius or grotesque, Crash remains one of the boldest and most banned sci-fi films of the 1990s. 14. The Matrix, 1999. When reality became too dangerous to question. When The Matrix hit theaters in 1999, it didn't just redefine science fiction, it challenged reality itself. The Wachowski siblings' groundbreaking cyber thriller blurred the line between man and machine, illusion and truth, asking one haunting question: what if everything you know is a lie? But the film's philosophical themes, violent imagery, and anti-establishment undertones quickly made it a target of controversy worldwide. In several countries, including China, Egypt, and parts of the Middle East, The Matrix was temporarily banned or heavily censored, accused of promoting rebellion against authority and spreading dangerous ideas. The movie's now iconic scenes, like Neo dodging bullets in slow motion or awakening from the human battery pod, sparked fears that it could inspire real-world unrest and anti-government sentiment. Some governments even claimed the movie's concept of escaping the system could lead to social destabilization. After the 1999 Columbine tragedy in the US, media critics also blamed The Matrix for supposedly influencing violent behavior through its trench coat culture aesthetic. For a brief period, TV networks hesitated to air clips, and some theaters even pulled the film entirely. Despite all that, The Matrix became a pop culture revolution, a bold vision of human freedom that remains more relevant than ever in today's digital age. Its mix of martial arts, cyberpunk philosophy, and dystopian rebellion made it not just a sci-fi movie, but a modern myth. Even now, decades later, The Matrix continues to provoke deep questions about control, technology, and the illusion of choice, reminding us that sometimes the most dangerous films are the ones that make us think. 15. Natural City, 1999. The Blade Runner of South Korea that crossed the line. In the dying glow of the 20th century, one film from South Korea dared to reimagine the future and ended up too controversial for its own time. This was Natural City, a haunting cyberpunk odyssey that critics called South Korea's answer to Blade Runner. Set in the year 2080, humanity lives side by side with lifelike cyborgs, machines designed for pleasure, war, and labor. But these creations have an expiration date, and when their time runs out, they're decommissioned. Yet one soldier, R, refuses to let go of his synthetic lover, Rhea, a cyborg whose life is slipping away. His obsession drives him to break every rule of the futuristic city he swore to protect. Natural City wasn't just a sci-fi movie, it was a philosophical tragedy. It explored what it truly means to love something that isn't human, and questioned if emotions could exist within artificial souls. But the movie's bold visuals and emotional intimacy also brought controversy. Critics accused it of being too sensual, too violent, and too derivative of Western cyberpunk aesthetics. Some regions briefly banned or heavily censored the film for its adult themes, bleak depiction of technology, and graphic fight sequences. Despite the backlash, Natural City has become a cult classic, a forgotten gem that predicted today's AI obsession long before it became real. It's a film that dared to ask, if we build machines capable of love, are we still human when we destroy them? Natural City, 1999. Banned in parts of Asia, forgotten by mainstream audiences, but remembered by true sci-fi purists as one of the most emotional cyberpunk stories ever told. If you love discovering bold and forgotten sci-fi films like Natural City, don't forget to hit subscribe to Globewise Entertainment, where we bring you the hidden, the banned, and the unforgettable side of cinema history. From dystopian futures to forbidden experiments, these films proved that science fiction isn't just about aliens or technology, it's about how far humanity is willing to go in its search for truth, power, and freedom. Some of these movies were banned for pushing limits, but today, they stand as bold reminders that art can't be silenced forever. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the banned sci-fi legends of the 80s and 90s, make sure to subscribe to Globewise Entertainment, where forgotten classics and untold Hollywood stories come back to life every week. So, which of these banned sci-fi films blew your mind the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your picks and theories. Until next time, keep exploring the strange, the shocking, and the spectacular world of cinema. This is Globewise Entertainment, signing off from the edge of imagination.